The Dark Ages, a term that evokes images of chaos, decline, and intellectual stagnation. It's a label laden with negative connotations, painting a picture of Europe plunged into a period of utter backwardness. However, this perception is more a product of historical bias than historical accuracy. The era, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th centuries, was undoubtedly a time of significant change and upheaval. Yet it was also a period marked by resilience, adaptation, and the laying of foundations for future cultural blossoming. To truly understand this era, we must move beyond the simplistic label of Dark Ages and delve into the nuances of its historical reality. The term itself is a relatively modern invention, coined by Renaissance scholars who viewed themselves as inheritors of the classical world, a world they believed was lost during the intervening centuries. The so-called Dark Ages encompass a vast period roughly from the 5th century with the fall of the Western Roman Empire to the dawn of the Renaissance in the 15th century. It's crucial to acknowledge the sheer span of time this term encompasses, as it was far from static or universally bleak. Following the Roman Empire's fall, Europe was fragmented into smaller kingdoms, leading to political instability and frequent warfare. This period did see a decline in literacy and urban life, particularly in Western Europe, as Roman infrastructure crumbled and centralized governance waned. However, to characterize this era solely by decline is to ignore the significant cultural, intellectual, and social transformations taking place. This era witnessed the rise of new powers, the spread of Christianity, and the flourishing of Islamic civilization, which would profoundly shape the course of history. One of the most persistent myths surrounding the Dark Ages is the notion of widespread barbarity. The term itself conjures images of uncivilized hordes wreaking havoc across a helpless continent. While it's true that the period saw its share of violence and conflict, it's crucial to remember that the so-called barbarian tribes were not monolithic or inherently destructive. These groups, such as the Goths, Vandals, and Franks, had their own rich cultures, traditions, and legal systems. They were not simply agents of chaos, but active participants in shaping the political and cultural landscape of the former Roman territories. For example, the Carolingian Renaissance during the reign of Charlemagne in the 8th and 9th centuries witnessed a revival of art, literature, and architecture in Western Europe. The notion of the Dark Ages as a period devoid of learning is another misconception that needs to be challenged. While it's true that the collapse of the Roman education system led to a decline in literacy rates in some parts of Europe, learning was far from extinguished. Monasteries scattered throughout Europe became vital centers for preserving knowledge. Monks painstakingly copied ancient texts, ensuring the survival of classical works that would have otherwise been lost. They also served as educators, providing instruction in religious doctrine, Latin, and other subjects. Meanwhile, the Islamic world was experiencing its golden age, a period of unprecedented intellectual and cultural flourishing. From the 8th to the 13th centuries, Islamic scholars made groundbreaking advancements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Their works would later influence European scholars, playing a crucial role in the eventual Renaissance. Section 5. Life beyond the plague, thriving communities and cultural exchange. The Black Death, a devastating pandemic that swept through Europe in the 14th century, is often cited as evidence of the Dark Ages' grim reality. While the plague's impact was undeniably horrific, it's essential to remember that this catastrophe occurred towards the end of the period we're discussing and doesn't represent the entirety of life during the Middle Ages. Throughout the so-called Dark Ages, communities across Europe continued to thrive. People farmed, traded, created art, and engaged in cultural exchange. The Vikings, often portrayed as marauding raiders, were also skilled navigators and traders, establishing trade routes that spanned from North America to the Caspian Sea. These interactions brought new ideas, goods, and technologies to Europe, enriching the continent and contributing to its development. Section 6. Seeds of innovation, technological advancements in the dark. The idea that the Dark Ages were devoid of innovation is another misconception that needs to be debunked. While the period might not have witnessed the same pace of technological advancement as the Roman era or the later Renaissance, it was far from static. In fact, several key innovations emerged during this time that would lay the groundwork for future progress. The heavy plough, for example, revolutionized agriculture, allowing for the cultivation of heavier soils in northern Europe. The watermill, another crucial invention, provided a more efficient source of power, leading to advancements in milling, weaving, and other industries. The development of the three-field system of crop rotation increased agricultural yields, contributing to population growth and the rise of towns. These technological advancements, often overlooked, demonstrate that the so-called Dark Ages were not a period of technological stagnation, but rather a time of gradual but significant innovation. Section 7. A Bridge to Brilliance, the complex transition to the Renaissance. The Renaissance, with its rediscovery of classical knowledge and its flourishing of art, literature, and science, is often seen as a stark departure from the perceived darkness of the preceding centuries. However, this perspective overlooks the crucial role that the Middle Ages played in setting the stage for the Renaissance. The cultural and intellectual achievements of the Islamic Golden Age, preserved and translated in part by medieval scholars, provided a foundation for the scientific and philosophical inquiries of the Renaissance. The rise of universities in the later Middle Ages, institutions that would become centers of learning during the Renaissance, was a direct outgrowth of the scholastic tradition fostered in medieval monasteries. The Renaissance, far from emerging out of nowhere, was built upon the foundations laid during the so-called Dark Ages. Section 8. Dispelling the Myths. A realistic look at the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages, as a monolithic period of decline, is a myth that needs to be retired from our historical vocabulary. While Europe undoubtedly faced challenges following the Roman Empire's fall, the era was far from static or universally bleak. It was a period of transformation, adaptation, and the emergence of new cultural and intellectual forces that would shape the course of history. The so-called Barbarian Tribes were not simply agents of chaos, but active participants in shaping the political and cultural landscape. Monasteries preserved knowledge and fostered learning, while the Islamic Golden Age witnessed unprecedented intellectual advancements. Communities across Europe continued to thrive, engaging in trade, agriculture, and cultural exchange. Technological innovations, though perhaps less dramatic than in other eras, laid the groundwork for future progress. Section 9. A call to rethink. Embracing the nuances of history. By clinging to the simplistic narrative of the Dark Ages, we do a disservice to the complexities of history. This label, laden with negative connotations, prevents us from appreciating the nuances of a period that witnessed both decline and innovation, conflict and cooperation, destruction and creation. It's time to move beyond this reductive term and embrace a more nuanced understanding of the Middle Ages. Let us delve into the rich tapestry of this era, exploring the diverse cultures, beliefs, and achievements that characterize this transformative period. Let us acknowledge the challenges while also celebrating the resilience and ingenuity of the people who navigated this complex historical landscape. Only by embracing the full spectrum of this era can we truly appreciate its impact on the course of human history. Section 10. Conclusion. The enduring legacy of a misunderstood era. The so-called Dark Ages, far from being a period of utter darkness, were a time of significant transformation, adaptation, and the laying of foundations for future cultural and intellectual achievements. To dismiss this era as merely a period of decline is to overlook the richness and complexity of its history. The echoes of this era reverberate through time, influencing the art, literature, philosophy, and political structures of the world we live in today. It's time to shed the outdated and misleading label of Dark Ages and recognize this period for what it truly was. A vibrant and transformative era that played a pivotal role in shaping the course of human history.